if you're not super savvy with tabletop role-playing games, you've probably still heard of Dungeons and Dragons, but you may not have heard of Blades in the Dark or Lancer, maybe even less so Tales from the Motherlands, Coyote and Crow, Extreme Meat Punks. There are so many different systems of tabletop role-playing games. Some of them are solo, some of them are two-player. Like, there's one called Thirsty Sword Lesbians, okay? There. Sorry, I get really excited at how many different ways people have divined these systems so that folks can sit down at a table and tell a story in a way that feels exciting and meaningful to them. And I think particularly as people of color, it's really important for us to be able to recognize that there are tons of ways for us to sit down at the table. We don't have to just cater to the lowest common denominator. So our next speakers are four out of five GMs in a trench coat. They have created a podcast where every season they use a different game system to tell their story. They develop a number of marginalized characters, and they're here to tell us about their storytelling experiences. Please welcome to the stage 5 GMs in a trench coat. Well, 4 GMs in a trench coat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Genre Remix Collaborative Storytelling Beyond Stereotypes. Thank you for joining us. So, you may be wondering right now, who are we? Well, I'm Kim, and I have my cast members and the people I do this podcast with here on call with me. But we are 5 Gems in a Trench Coat. We are a tabletop role-playing game actual play podcast that rotates game masters and tabletop systems each season. Adam, who's on screen here, assembled us in 2023, and we've been doing this ever since. And as of October of last year, we are now a fully BIPOC cast and team, majority LGBTQ+, and neurodivergent. So, listening to us, you won't get the same story twice. Really quick, I'm going to run through my lovely cast members here. So I'm Kim. I'm the marketing manager, audio editor, and cast member of this. I'm going to popcorn it over to Adam real quick.
Hey there, I'm Adam. I am the creative director, co-founder, and also a cast member. I'll popcorn it to Tanlynn.
Hello, I'm Tanlynn. I am a cast member, GM, and the art director of our lovely podcast. So if you see art, it's probably me. There's only one
And
other
I'm
person
Jesse.
left.
Yep. I'm Jesse. And I just gotta play the games. Hey.
Hey.
Oh, Jesse, we love you. So, I know we're at Game Developers of Color, and it focuses mostly on video games, so you may have heard of TTRPGs before, or might not be too familiar with them. So, we're here to say what are TTRPGs and why are we playing them? So, TTRPG stands for Tabletop Role-Playing Game. It is a cooperative storytelling and role-playing game where we roll dice that help determine the outcome of a situation. It gathers a group of people, for example, us, to make original characters to play in these systems. And typically for these systems, there's a set of rules and settings that set each of them apart. And on the right side of the screen are just a couple examples of TTRPGs that you can see out there in the wild and that we have played on the podcast. So I'm going to bump it over to Jesse, who's going to talk about his season, Blood Money.
Hello. So for my season, I chose Cyberpunk because I played the games and I watched the show, and I just thought it'd be really cool to have a game in Night City. And the reason that the module stood out to me was because the game was all about being unforgiving. This is Night City. You die easily. When you go down, there's a pretty good chance you're just going to die. And in the game, there's an economy system where you have to pay rent, pay health insurance, and pay your living expenses. So you're constantly having to grind that money in Night City. A usual name that the Cyberpunk game goes by is Poverty Simulator, because that's pretty much what it is. So what the inspiration for the story was based off of Jack Welch, the former CEO of GE. He's someone that the heads of the megacorps in Night City would look up to. Specifically, the story that inspired me was that in the 90s, GE got a massive military contract, And he was obviously really happy about that. They made a bunch of money, but he came across the problem that all rich people hate, is that they had to pay taxes on those profits. So he came up with a solution to close down a profitable factory and count it as a loss in his taxes. So he made a bunch of rich people a lot of money while laying off a bunch of workers and ruining their livelihood. And this made me think about how the people working there probably believe that they work for a big corporation and that they're a family, and that because they were working hard and making money, obviously their jobs was safe. But at the end of the day, the man at the top decided that the short-term benefits was more beneficial than the long-term benefits of their livelihood. So the three main villains in the story reflect this. First, there's a corrupt mayor who puts the profits of corporations before the well-being of his people and uses the secret police to harass the people and instoke fear into the people. You know, something that we can't relate to, but this is fantasy, right? But at the end of the day, he's abandoned by the corporations because they just replace him with someone who will do the same job cheaper. Then there's a sociopath that excels in the corporate environment that the corporations created, but she ends up being left in some rubble because it would cost too much to fix her. So they were like, we'll just make another one. And then finally, a scientist who had good intentions trying to help people, but he had to rely on the resources of a mega corporation for his research, and thus making his research used for corporate benefit as opposed to the good that he meant for it. But at the end of the day, our edge runners tried to fight back against the megacorps. In the setting, it's the red, which is the repercussions of Johnny Silverhand blowing up Arasaka Tower. If you're familiar with the games, that's a major plot point. And Arasaka's kicked out because of this. Their job was basically to try to help Arasaka get back in, but they decided, no, we're not gonna do that at the end. But as they say in Night City always wins, and it doesn't matter that they did their best to keep Arasaka out and loosen the control of Militech in Night City. And in 2077, as we see in the games, they come back and they're just as powerful as ever. Their actions mean nothing. Their sacrifices meant nothing. But that's Night City for you. So now we're gonna go into the characters, and when we were making the characters, I wanted to have them heavily focus on how each of them would fit into the niches carved by a capitalistic and predatory society. So first is Tanlynn.
Hi, you met me before. I'm Tanlynn. Madame Despair, or her actual name was Desiree Sinclair. I wanted to do like a femme fatale done right. So she knows how she's perceived and she uses it to gain power. But she's also like this very tragic character with this lesson on the dangers of proximity to that sort of power as a marginalized individual. Throughout the story, she's has her hand in the pot, and you know she has it better off than everyone else. But if she makes a wrong move, it could be gone just as easy. And she does eventually make a wrong move because of love in choosing friendship over the social climb. And that's really all of the points I wanted to hit about her. She also has a little net runner. Is that what it's called? A net runner? Right. Yeah, okay, cool. Wesley Nurkle, who's just kind of her assistant, which is kind of the love that she chooses. We could go over to Doc because I love him.
Yeah, hey, I'm Adam. I played Arthur, Doc Kupersky. Arthur was a doctor in Night City, which is a rough job. On top of that, Arthur was a gay man who had lost his partner. I discussed with Jesse kind of the tragedy of that, and so a lot of Arthur's characterization throughout the series is fundamentally that of someone who is kind of ready to go. He's ready to die. He's a reckless person. He's acting in grief 90% of the time until he finds this group that he becomes close with and becomes friends with. We utilize the downtime mechanic specifically for Doc to kind of show exactly how a marginalized like person, even as they become it's this kind of separation, right? The dichotomy between like as a marginalized person, similar to Madame Despair, you could either end up with your hand in the pot and the proximity to it, where you exist but you may not be loved, or you can stay in community, something like Doc did. And for my downtime, I would do free clinics, and I would have people in my community, in the community in game, come to me and take care of them and heal their things and whatnot. And that is a way we utilized that mechanic to kind of explicitly show that even in kind of his death throes here, Doc was still looking into community and looking towards community to ensure that he utilized his capabilities to help community, even though he was a bit of a madman by the end of the series, or by the beginning of the series, really. Yeah, and that's Doc's characterization. He's one of marginalized people who became or was gained access to the proximity to success and still continued to stay in community. And then obviously Kim, our last character.
Yeah, hi. I played Aku during this season. Aku, I like to describe them as a weird little tech gremlin. They were very privy to tech and being able to make things. But the big thing about Aku and Aku's character is that Jesse and I talked a lot before we started the season about his backstory. So with his backstory, his parents worked for Arasaka and made a highly sought after tech. And things went wrong, and his parents had passed away, but the tech still lived on. And so, a really big thing that Aku explores throughout the season is that he is left to deal with pretty much the things that his parents tried to do and to succeed in a capitalistic society. The way I played Aku very early on in the season is that he just kind of took jobs to make the rent and didn't super care about where it came from as long as it got paid well and he was able to make rent. And so I guess in the sense of like TTRPG stereotypes and things like that, he was more of like the loner character, I would say. But it was really great. And something that I noticed, because I do the audio editing for the podcast as well, as I was listening back to it, the sort of relationship that Doc and Aku sort of manifest throughout the season is something I think really special because I think Doc shows Aku the value of community and like that there opens their eyes really to like the sort of things that Night City imposes onto these people and these marginalized peoples. Um, and so I think that that's something that was really great, and that was done well. And it was because of the way that our characters had interacted throughout the whole season. And so Aku was really a like lesson in capitalism's destruction of culture and familial ties and what that does to a person. And can you pretty much reconcile that? So yeah, that was Aku. And we shall now go over to Tanlyn to talk about our season 3, Twisted Kingdom. Tanlyn.
Hi, I'm Tanlynn again. So season 3, I chose Dungeons and Dragons because I really wanted to subvert the expectations of like traditional fantasy and the traditional hero story. And I also wanted to dig into like fantasy horror for that. Um, and the main theme that I kind of went for was like what makes a hero and what makes a monster. Why can't they be both, really? And so I was really conscious of the stereotypes and pitfalls that D&D tropes can have, especially within the races and the monstrous races. There's races in D&D and fantasy stories that are monstrous and evil, but a lot of them are kind of just caricatures of marginalized individuals, especially in like older versions. Um, we don't have to go super deep into that, but if you know, you know. Um, so with that in mind, I kind of made this homebrew world that highlighted all of that with elves and humans being sort of the race in power while everything else was kind of underneath them. Let's see. Yeah, and so we came up with characters all together that experienced like real hardships because of the way the world was set up, and I think now would be probably a good time to meet those characters. Sending over, sending it over to Kim.
Hello, it's me again. Hi. I played Reen during this season, and Reen was a character who was wrongfully imprisoned. Tanlyn and I had talked before the beginning of the season. We all talked about like why we were in prison and if we were there like for a reason or if we were wrongfully imprisoned. And the thing with Reen was that she was put there because of ultimately a manipulate ultimately because a manipulation of tradition. With her backstory, she was basically from a guild of assassins, and she was training to become like the next great assassin. And basically, her big mission that was going to determine whether she was worthy or not, was to go to this huge scientist that worked for the king and was doing these unsavory things and basically assassinate him. But when she arrived, nothing was there. It didn't seem like he was there for a while. And because of that, guards were patrolling she wasn't informed of, and she was arrested. And so her journey, like here in the season and with the other characters specifically, was Reen kind of coming to terms with that, and her journey in the season sort of ended by eventually becoming the matriarch of the group. So while she didn't ultimately become like the head of her like Assassin's Guild, she became the head of something else, and I think something that was way more tight-knit and made her grow and like flourish as an individual. I'm sort of seeing that like sure she could be sent on things because people are telling her to, but are they doing the right thing ultimately as well? And like, should she have her own like experiences and way that she's seeing things that ultimately determines like what she's doing and if that makes her a hero and that sort of thing. Going back to Talon's point. So yeah, and then I will pop it over to Two and a Half Horns, who was pretty much the one who made her the matriarch of the group.
Hello, I played Two and a Half Horns. So Two and a Half Horns, as you can see, is a Minotaur. Also, I didn't ask to make him hot. Tanlyn just made him hot. So just want to throw that out there. That's on her. So Two and a Half Horns returns from his warrior trial only to find that his nomadic people have disappeared. They were victims of the colonial expansion of the kingdom, and not knowing if they are alive or dead, he enters the kingdom in order to search for them. When designing him, I wanted a mix of Gaul and Native American aesthetics, the Gaul being the original barbarians that halted the Roman expansion, and Native American because his story of losing his people and culture reflect their real life struggles. But when designing him, I was going back and forth with Tanlyn, and she was hesitant about giving him a more Native American look because the character was the big dumb guy archetype, and we were afraid that giving him a more Native American aesthetic might perpetuate a noble savage stereotype, and we didn't want that to be part of it. But the thing is that the character, although he was kind of that archetype, he was more than just a big dumb guy. He was very emotionally intelligent. He came from matriarchal society, which is also usually targeted by patriarchal societies. And he, and because of this, when they were confronted by a bunch of creepy acid baby monsters, he chose to try to play with them and distract them in using a non-violent option as opposed to just cutting them down. And this kind of intelligence is not valued in a patriarchal colonialist society like the kingdom was. And so he would be deemed dumb because of that, because that kind of intelligence isn't valued, unfortunately. And then finally, we have Callan.
Hey, I'm Adam again. I played Callan this season. Similar to Jesse's points a lot here, Callan is a lot of represents a lot of indigeneity and kind of the way in which colonialism has affected indigenous peoples, but also I'd love to draw attention to specifically the character art of both Two and a Half Horns and Catelyn. They're both representative of like indigenous peoples, but they're very different characters. Oh my gosh, indigenous people are not a monolith. Crazy, and that was incredibly important to us. Tanlyn, as creative director, I work a lot with Tanlyn on the art stuff, and so like Jesse was saying, in communication with Tanlyn, there was discussions about Two and a Half Horns, and then similarly there's discussions about Callan, and we wanted to make sure that both these characters, one represented the like the monster character races that they represent, but two also represented in ways the fact that they are indigenous or that they are A, B, or C, while also being their own character, which I think Tam did a fantastic job of because that's our art director right there. Um, Going into Callan as a character, Callan was a young goblin who grew up on the outskirts of the kingdom, like far into like the boonies, pretty much, just out into the forest, in a small village with his family, who was a family of farmers, a full goblin family in a mostly goblin town that was attacked and conquered and destroyed, as they often are, by the kingdom because the kingdom decided that it wanted more space or it wanted to get rid of goblins, whatever the justification was, right? And so, in that, seeing Callan being a competent farmer and a competent family, we recognize the fact that indigenous people were incredibly competent. They didn't need to be taught things. They knew how to tend the land. They knew how to take care of things. And so Callan here lost all of that. He managed to escape. He lost his entire family. He lost his entire culture, and was luckily or unluckily, depending on how you view it, was found by an ex-monster hunter who had kind of realized that a lot of the damage he had done in hunting monsters, because maybe this chimera was just protecting its child and I killed it for no reason. It wasn't some terrifying monster. And similarly, the goblins aren't monsters. And this ex-monster hunter trained Callan to functionally get revenge on the people that did that to him. And the thing with Callan that we really wanted to represent, one, is I used a lot of D&D tropes. He's functionally an edgelord. He's functionally a murder hobo. Like, that's what the character is. He's made to kill things. He is quite literally in prison because he killed people. Like, he was caught killing a government wizard of the kingdom. He had killed a government paladin of the kingdom. And on top of that, I wanted Callan to represent becoming the thing that they say you are. Callan became the monstrous goblin that hunts people in the shadows and surprises people and sneaks up on people. Callan became those things because of hate and vitriol that the society created for him. And that's functionally what Callan is. And he's a very in-depth character, and he grew to be this kind of beautiful, sad, heroic point where he taught other children who had lost their families kind of the difference. He hated killing. He hated what he had to do, but I think that that's what made this character so fantastic. And yeah, I'll hop out of that.
Yeah, there was just a few more that I wanted to touch on, specifically with the characters. You could probably see in all the art that each of them have their own sort of weapon tailored specifically for them. D&D is such a collaborative story. I really like making things specifically for characters to like pick up or, get as a gift. Callan specifically, his sword was a gift from his adopted father that had this unique ability to like store the last thing that the creature it last felled did. Uh, and stuff like that just won't come about without other people telling stories with you. Um, More nitty gritty sort of stuff I wanted to talk about real quick, because D&D is a crunchy game, which means like numbers matter. So throughout the whole story, I was just like figuring out what could be a roll, what could be a skills check, what could be a saving throw. And a lot of the things that I pulled from just for inspiration were video games, like horror video games, specifically Silent Hill and the Resident Evil series. We talked about baby monsters. If you played Resident Evil 8, there is a whole level where this gross baby hallucination follows you around and is just the antagonist. And I kind of wanted to do something like that, but I tailored it to fit in D&D. A lot of what I did was finding things and being like, okay, I like that. How can I make this work? So I, instead of it being like this creature follows you around, it was more environmental, that it was hard to get out of the environment. It was a looping sort of maze. And then these creatures would show up and try and distract or separate the party. And I turned them into this lesson on nurture versus nature. And so I made a table for each of the party members of attributes and skills and abilities. And when the babies touched them, hurting them on purpose or not, they would pull from that, gain those attributes, and use them against them if that was how they were used. And that goes to Jesse talking about being this motherly figure almost to these babies. And it's just a wonderful moments that you get when playing with other people. It's fantastic. And I think that's all we have to say about my season. So we can go over to Kim.
Whoa, I'm back again. Hi. We're going to talk about season 4, which is my season, called Beyond the Barrier. So for this season, I specifically was looking for a system that could help me tell this story that is very rooted in like detective noir, and things like that. And I wanted to tell the story of like multiple sort of factions or mobs kind of competing against each other to gain a sort of power. And in doing that research, I found that Blades in the Dark came up a lot. And Blades in the Dark is done by John Harper at Evil Hat Productions. It is a fantastic game. I fell in love with it personally. I really enjoyed a lot of the mechanics that the game uses to try to forward the action. Me personally, I'm a very narrative first GM instead of mechanics. I can run games like D&D, but there are a lot of numbers and things involved. And me personally, I don't love that. So Blades in the Dark was the perfect system for me to use these sort of mechanics narratively. So, for example, the clock mechanic is a thing in the game where basically you draw a little circle and you make however many quadrants you want to make for how big or how quickly the task will take. So, for example, say that you make a circle and you put it into 4 quadrants, meaning it is a less complicated task, and you fill those sort of quadrants in as like things are happening in the background, which I really love to do as a GM, that might come into play with your players. And they also have the vice mechanic and indulging in your vice, to sort of show you how like these characters interact within the system and the society that they are. So, like I said previously before, I took a lot of inspiration from film noir and detective media. I'm a film girly. I love movies, and I love the sort of aesthetics of film noir. And the thing is that as with early movies and with movies in general, they are predominantly white and they're predominantly cis male white. Even though the films of or the even though the themes of film noir can explore like the complexities of BIPOC and marginalized peoples being impacted by the system. So very early on in my season, I sort of established that there is a mayoral election going on, which is kind of going to be like the undercurrent of the whole season, and which I gather this group here to sort of like figure out the mystery behind these weird goings-ons and things like that. It was really important for me to highlight the sort of implications of isolationism, as the city of Doughshire is encased in a magical bubble, and the power vacuum it can create, and the sort of way that like stories and tales of old are told and sort of uphold the status quo of like, well, the dome is here to protect us, but as I pose throughout the season, is the dome there to protect them, or is the dome there to keep something in from getting out? And so a lot of my season explores these sort of themes of like what happens when members of community are constantly pitted against each other. And when that happens, that those who are wealthy or have access to other resources come out on top. I also have the sort of big four sort of like mobs in the area who like are the dominant ones and things like that. And they're the ones sort of manipulating the system. And so by those being manipulated by the system, we will go into our characters here. I will have you first talk about Richard Jesse, because I love Richard, even though he might be a little bit of a shithead.
Hello. So I played Richard Gravis. His like code name was Graves. So Richard is kind of a shitty guy. He's an aggressively average white man with delusions of grandeur from growing up with noir detective novels. He believes that he's this great private detective, although his only achievement is finding 2 out of the 10 cats that he was hired to find, and is now being haunted by said cats. But even though his failures literally follow and haunt him, he believes that life is like his books, and that and makes wild conclusions when he's actually given a chance to be a private detective and investigate problems. Um, his need to be accepted ends up leading him to completely derail the campaign, putting the whole team in danger. And when he's faced with the consequences of his actions, instead of owning up to it and taking steps to improve himself or the situation, he instead tries to take shortcuts by summoning a demon to trade his soul to fix everything. So that's really all there is to him. He's just kind of a shitty dude that believes he's the greatest. So we'll move on to Desiree.
On to passing over to me this season. I played Desideria Barrera. She was kind of this representation of someone who was incredibly capable. She's sharp-witted, sharp-tongued. She's constantly going around society and making things kind of bend to her way. Similar, kind of constantly working with her cousin Kyle, who we'll talk about in a bit. Taylor and I really wanted to exemplify, one, because we're cousins, but two, the Black and brown experience. Black and brown people coexist in these same spaces kind of constantly. We exist in very, very proximal communities and are in community with each other at a constant. Taylor and I grew up in California, so, Southern California specifically. We grew up in Norwalk, Bellflower areas, which, if you've been around, you know, are heavily populated with Black and Hispanic people. It's great over there. I love it. That's where we grew up. And so we wanted to represent kind of ourselves with these characters. On top of that, D was very important to me, the character design, because one, we did go for a bit of femme fatale, but also she has the hoop earrings and the red lipstick and the lip lining and kind of the pompadour-esque hair, very like we're referencing here the kind of zoot suit and rockabilly movement that's very, very heavy in Chicano culture. She literally has a pinstripe suit on. I watched my cousins and my tias and my mom dress up and have these outfits on and have this makeup on, and it was important to me to represent a character who was intelligent. Dee is college educated. Dee is going for her PhD. There's a running joke about her dissertation that she's working on throughout the series as her downtime. Dee is more than just one thing. Dee is multifaceted, hyper intelligent, and that was very intentional because I've seen a lot of appropriation of these kinds of makeups and representations of brown women who I've seen get called certain things because of the way they dressed. But now we're seeing non-brown women wear these things and call it a brownie lip or a B or C. And I really wanted to have the character design reflect that Dee is competent, but also represents something that I grew up with and grew up in, and then passing it to my lovely cousin.
Hi, I'm cousin both in game and out. Kyle was sort of this brute type character, but he's a really kind and caring guy. I really wanted to dig heavily into that. I think throughout the whole series, he's like kissing his homies, you know, showing physical affection and verbal affection, as well as beating up his enemies. He can be multifaceted. He's also very well educated. He left the slums to go to college with his cousin, and only came back because he wanted to give back to his community and do what they know, you know? And I think that's a really interesting point that we wanted to make, coming back for our communities, Black and brown solidarity. And yeah, I think Adam touched on a lot of things that I was going to touch on, because our characters are kind of really interwoven. But yeah, that's really all I want to touch on for him.
Yeah, I really enjoyed recording my season. Really quick note that I want to do. When you're going to play a TTRPG, you may have plans set in place. Your players will throw them out the window regardless, no matter what. In the season, I have a certain MacGuffin, and in that MacGuffin, there is the spirit of a young child. And that wasn't a plot point that was fully fleshed out. It was only fully fleshed out because that was a point that my players wanted to pursue. So that's the wonderful thing about TTRPGs, is that you can have an idea for your story, but kind of similar with like video games and things like that. There are plot points and there are choices that the people that are playing are going to make that may not be entirely what you planned for. The thing that's different with TTRPGs is that may drastically alter your story. That ended up becoming a really big plot point in my season and kind of like tied into the sort of final fight and things like that. So that's just a really great thing about TTRPGs. And here we are going to jump over to our final season we're going to be talking about. And as this is airing, it's going to be releasing. Adam, if you want to talk about your season.
Yes, hello. This season, as we're recording, is unreleased, but we've recorded a lot of the season, and as this is airing, we'll be just releasing. I wanted to play for our final of our first round of seasons. All of our 5 original cast members have finally run their games. This is the last one run by me. It's Kids on Bikes, second edition. And I really wanted to capture sort of, I guess, like a contemporary magical. It's set in our real world, but cryptids and magic is real. But it's like under the surface real. It's very much our world. And it's, if everyone was like, oh, you know about the Loch Ness Monster, and people are like, I don't believe in it. The people who didn't believe in it are wrong. That's functionally the magic of this world, is that every cryptid you hear whispers about is a real cryptid. It's set in 1987 United States, and it's based around 3 young adults traveling cross-country, doing a cross-country state-to-state road trip because their parents always say that's the best time they had to drop their really good friend off in New York at MIT. So specifically, this is, like I said, Kids on Bikes by Hunters Entertainment, and we wanted to use the 80s retro horror genre that often mishandles BIPOC stories. Like we often see the black character dying first in a lot of original 80s, or like a lot of original horror. And we really wanted to kind of have this like coming of age and growing older story and leaving summer behind in a lot of ways, because as you age out of a certain range, summers become different for you. The first three episodes had two different character sheets, one for the kids and one for the teens. So I had them kind of play as the children in the beginning portions of it to really capture just how important we wanted their like growth to be. On top of all that, it was really important for us to really hone in on being a BIPOC person, a Black and Indigenous person of color. In 1987 in the Americas, just in the Americas in general, not everywhere in the Americas loves you. Not every single city or town is gonna love us. And on top of that, we really want to focus on cryptids and aliens and things alike, because when we look at those, we see these things that are othered, the monsters, and who else is othered but us. And so seeing these kids coexist alongside these cryptids and discover these cryptids, in a sense, is them discovering kind of the reality about them in society, right? And that was incredibly important to us. And yeah, I'll kind of popcorn it over to our characters, who all are one sort of trope-esque, but also so incredibly like close to the heart. The season's so incredibly close to the heart, because to be fair, these are all like almost pseudo self-inserts, which is something we rarely do in series. But these characters are very, very close to heart here. And Tanlyn, we have Hobby first.
Hey, this is my baby. Um, I really just wanted to play a young black man in the 80s, because I feel like the 80s genre does that wrong a lot. I didn't want to fall into tokenization, so he's a very well-rounded character because I'm a very well-rounded person, you know? I was very purposeful in choosing stereotypical like attributes you'd find in 80s media for like black individuals. So sports is a big part of his character. He plays basketball. Um, but he's just not just a black kid who plays sports. He has issues. He has complex relationships with his love for sports, with his family, with his friends, and the way his father pushes him to do sports, the way his friends push him to love himself and them. It's there's a lot to be found in the story, and I love him so much, and I love us so much, and I think we should go to the next character before I gush too much about him.
Hey, I played Zeke, or Ezekiel. Um, Zeke's backstory is purposely kind of vague. All we really know about it is his grandfather fought in the war in the old country on his mother's side, and for his father's side, his father built a successful mechanic shop. His story is all about not feeling like he has an identity, being mixed race, but not having a connection to either side, feeling pressured to take over the family business that his father made sacrifices and worked hard for, expecting his son to follow the same machismo he views that he has. His separation from his father's culture is further due to his parents pushing Americanization on Zeke, moving him to a small town and not teaching him Spanish so he'll properly be able to fit in with everybody. But unfortunately, this further isolates him, makes him feel like he's not really part of any real community. But luckily, he finds his friends, and he's able to find a safe place with his friends, able to be himself and not feel pressured to becoming something he's not. And they're helping him find his own identity. And also the design for Zeke, he kind of looks like Adam and I mixed together, and I kind of like that. I always found that kind of funny. Anyway, and then we'll move on to our next character, Kim's character.
Oh God, I didn't realize that until you just pointed it out, and now I'm not going to be able to unsee it. Hi, I play Amanda Clementine Tachibana for this season, and as Adam says, this season feels a little bit like a self-insert for these characters, and for me especially. Very early on in the season, Adam made me feel like, oh my God, this is like my real life for a second. Because Amanda is Japanese American. I myself am a fourth generation Japanese American. And I really wanted to explore this idea and this concept that we have of the model minority and Asian exceptionalism. But going kind of further deeper into that, into the harm it can cause within communities and within family, it causes these sort of fractures that we don't really see explored too much except for a little bit more modern media. and how her design, as you can see, she's very goth, and how she finds community in the goth culture because she's unsure of how to find community in her own culture. Very similar to how I experience of like I may be Japanese American, but I don't really fit into Japanese culture, and I don't really fit into American culture. I'm at this weird in between place. So where do I find my place? And for Amanda, we're finding this like sort of rediscovery of finding her place with her friends, as this is all just sort of an exploration of ultimately friendship and how that sort of thing helps you grow. And especially as you're getting older, this sort of thing of like this close-knit community that you create yourself, and how that helps you like reflect and on these things that you are experiencing throughout the season. I don't want to spoil too much because as we're doing this, it's releasing and we've already recorded so much. But yeah, that's really Amanda in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I really quickly just want to jump back in to kind of close this out. So one, a quick reference to, like Kim was saying, finding friends. A lot of people I may not recognize this, but with BIPOC communities or BIPOC friendships, close friends become community. We end up like, so just for a real life example, Kim and I recently went, Kim brought us to Obon in LA, Little Tokyo. It's a wonderful celebration. It's a lot like Dia de los Muertos for Hispanic people or Mexican people specifically, and it was a lot of fun. But there was a tamale stand there, which I thought was very funny, because we always make the joke like, "Oh, Mark is rocking with us because we're rocking with Mark because Mark is rocking with us." It's just kind of one of those silly things that we always say, but also it's this thing of there's this recognition that BIPOC spaces are often so kind of mixed with each other because we exist in such similar spaces. And that's again what the story was about. Picking teenage kid characters is very important for us mechanically. There's a lot of room to grow for them, and I wanted to like sort of I recently played some of the Final Fantasy games, and I wanted to reflect this kind of like growing capacity that a lot of early JRPGs had, where these characters have all of this room to grow mechanically. And we've kind of been making minor adjustments as the episodes go on. And they begin getting little things here and there that are narratively important, but also mechanically important. And that's our fifth season, and it was so much fun.
Yeah, so in conclusion, the stories we tell on Five Gems in a Trench Coat are a result of all of us being able to bring our lived experiences into these characters. Literally every season that you will listen to, there is some part of us that we brought into these characters, some more than others. The narrative relies on us to work together, and especially with TTRPGs, to yes and. But also when we yes and, we're also trusting each other with these very vulnerable parts of ourselves. And because we're playing TTRPGs, we're able to use the mechanics to create these conflicts and expand on these character backstories in podcasts and highlight relationships between player characters. So like, for example, downtime mechanics allow for a breather and allow us to talk to each other. But at the end of the day, our stories are inherently and very incredibly authentically ours. And we hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Where you can find us on the internet. Every Monday at 6 a.m. Pacific time, we drop a main campaign episode. For right now, we are dropping Adam season. And you can get that wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on social media. We're pretty much at 5Gems in a Trench Coat everywhere, except for Blue Sky, where we're at 5gemsofficial.bsky.social. And you can check out our website at 5gemsinatrenchcoat.com. Thank you so, so much for joining us. We hope to see you in chat, and please enjoy the rest of the conference.
Bye.
Thank you so much to Kim Tsuyuki, Tanlynn Morgan, Adam Gonzales, and Jesse Espinoza. And if you're not following the podcast, go do it. They said, they got a new season. It's running right now. I hope that this talk helped you better understand not just the different systems that are available in tabletop role-playing, and not even just some of the stories that they've told, but the overall impact and power of systems. Part of the reason it's so important for us to get out here and to make our games and to share our stories, to help people see that there are different worlds that they can find themselves in, different ways that they can connect to culture, to their communities, to themselves. So I hope that you got a little bit of inspiration from that talk. If you would like to keep up with 5GMs in a Trench Coat, you can follow them on Threads, Instagram, or TikTok at 5GMs in a Trench Coat, or you can follow them on Blue Sky at 5GMs Official.